Good morning, Tapestry. Welcome to the first Sunday of a brand new year here in 2021. As you can tell, we are not in our normal setting, which is inside the Y, where we normally record all of our services, but we are outdoors today because I think all of us can agree that 2020 was not the best year. And as kind of a parting gift, 2020 gave us a little gut punch on the way out, and COVID has come too close to comfort for our little group, and so we have, out of an abundance of caution, we are recording outdoors, and it is just me and my trusty cameraman, audio tech, everything else that needs done today, buddy Jeremiah. But I like it because it's a new year and this is a new thing. But 2020, I think we can all agree, was terrible, and I don't want to go back and cover all of it because those of you watching lived through it. But there was a lot of loss in 2020. And for 2021, as I was thinking over what we were going to talk about and get the year rolling, and we've got some interesting ideas coming up for this year, but the overwhelming idea I had was that coming off of a year that had so much loss this year, I want us all to win. Like, I want us all to be winners. And the reason I want us to win is because winning is better than losing, right? Winning is better than losing. And if given the choice, I would choose every single time, I would choose winning over losing. Now, for anyone who actually knows me, saying that I would choose to win is an understatement. I am ridiculously competitive, and it has taken decades of maturation and growth and counseling to get my competitiveness under control, right? And all that being said, it's still a work in progress. Many of you would probably lose respect for me if you visited during a game night at my house. In fact, as I was kind of thinking back on my competitiveness, it's been so bad at times that friendships have been lost, respect was left far in the rearview mirror, familial relationships were shattered, but I didn't care. Winning was the best, right? So I did whatever I had to do. I wanted to win everything, and there are some of you listening who are with me and understand, and you're the same way. Some of you are the opposite of that, right? Some of you, you're not competitive at all, and you don't care about winning. It doesn't really matter to you, and I have to be honest for just a second with you. I don't get it. And it's hard for me to respect that because I don't understand. How do you not want to win? Winning is great, right? And so that's difficult. Some of you are somewhere in between those two things. You want to win, and if there's something that you're not good at and you know you can't win, you will not do it, right? You just won't. Right, and if you can't win, you won't do it. And I also can't relate to that either because my status as a mediocre white American male has convinced me that there is nothing that I cannot do, that I am great at everything, and so I think I can win at everything, and so I try to win at everything, right? But the winning I want to talk about when it comes to this new year, rolling into 2021, it has nothing to do with competition or being competitive, right? Somebody else doesn't have to lose for you to win in what I'm talking about for us to get rolling this year. So here's a question that I want you to wrestle with when it comes to your life in 2021. And this could be a life-changing question if you choose to wrestle with it for the rest of your life, right? And to ignore this question could cause you to look back on your life and realize that you spent it, to borrow a phrase that Solomon used in Ecclesiastes, that you basically spent your life chasing the wind. going after things that you could never catch or never have or never attain, or maybe not even really know what you were going after in the first place. And so this question is a question that people, they never ask it. And so consequently, they never answer it. And if you don't answer it, some arena of your life is going to inevitably feel like you are in some sort of race that you are pressured to finish. Right? But you're not sure which way you're supposed to be going in this race. The course isn't laid out clearly for you. Everybody else around you seems to be running with some kind of specific purpose, right? But you're not. You don't know where the finish line is. You don't know where you're trying to get to. You just feel like maybe there isn't hope, but there's a pressure to run, right? A pressure to perform, a pressure to do. Now, this question that we're going to talk about, I came across it in this book many, many years ago, and I was trying to remember exactly when, but this is a book. It's called The 7 Practices of Effective Ministry, and I remember that I had the group of people who were starting Tapestry way back in the 2000s. We went through this book together, and it had some really great stuff in it, and one of the things that was in it was this question that we're going to look at today. And if I'm honest with all of you and honest with myself, I forgot about the question. I forgot about it. It was great at the time, and it was all motivational while we were reading the book and talking about it as a group, but I forgot about it. And I failed to ask and consequently answer this question in a whole lot of areas in my life over the last 10 or so years. And as a result, as I look back on how things went, there are times that asking this question would have been immensely helpful, that would have saved me from a lot of wasted time, that would have helped me to get into a direction that I needed to be going, that I wasn't going in that moment. And so the question that I want you to wrestle with headed into 2021 is this: what is the win? For you, in your life, what is the win? Right? It's difficult to know if you're winning in any individual arena of life if you've never identified what the win actually is. Right? What is the win in your life relationally with the people around you? If you have a significant other, that's great. But what's the win for that relationship this year? Right? Financially, money is something that's constantly on our minds. For most of us, it's on our minds because we need more of it, and we're trying to figure out how to handle it. But what is the win for you in your finances in this upcoming year? Right? For your family, when it comes to your children, and the way that you're raising them and interacting with them, what is the win for you parents this year in that relationship? Professionally, for your career, what would define a win in your career? Right? So there are so many people, especially in that career one, who seem like they are just, that they're running harder than they've ever run before, that they're chasing something. And they didn't know that they already crossed the finish line of what they were running towards, because they didn't know what the finish line was. They didn't know what the win was. And as a result, they're exhausted. They're unable to relax. They're constantly on edge. They're constantly feeling like they're not enough, and they're having to perform more and more and more because they don't know what the win is and what they're actually trying to achieve. And in the arenas of life that matter the most, the vast majority of people never define the win. They never define it. And if you don't define your win, then you will end up adopting someone else's. Right? You will end up dating like everyone else dates. You'll end up spending your money the same way that everyone else spends their money. You'll spend your time like everybody else spends their time. You will parent either in the way that you were parented, in the exact opposite way you were parented, as just a direct reaction to the way you were parented, or the way everybody around you is parenting. Right? You'll work and approach your career like everybody else works. Or maybe even worse, maybe you'll just spend your life doing it not. Not necessarily defining what is the win and how you want to do it, but just doing it not like they did it. Or not like he's doing it, not like she's doing it, not like my parents did it. And living your life just not the way you want things to be, that falls short. That falls short because just being not isn't a win. Right? And you'll be inclined to go through life, if you live just with nots, you'll go through life and you'll be blaming others when you feel yourself not winning. You'll be comparing yourself to other people constantly. And especially when you feel like that you just aren't being successful. Right? And the problem may be that you've never decided what the win looks like. What the win actually is. So the question that I want to talk about this week as we kick off this year is, what is the win for you in the important arenas of life? And if you can't answer the question, what is the win? How do you know if you're winning or not? Right? And maybe that's a big question, like for all of life. But what about this? What about if like the win for life is just human? What about just for this season? What about just for now? What does a win look like now? Because there are different seasons in our life, and each have different definitions of what the win is and what you're going to be going after. Another way to think of it's like this. If that just seems kind of nebulous, like, wow, that's a big question, what's a win? Like, maybe ask some more specific questions to help get you there. Like maybe this one. When you pop into other people's heads, when other people think about you, what words do you want them to use to describe you? Right? And then once you've kind of come up with those words, wouldn't it be a win to decide ahead of time to order your life and your character and your conduct according to what you want those words to be that you want people to use when they think about you? That would be a win. You know, if it's in your marriage, because that's a pretty important arena of life. What's your win? Last Christmas, Kate gave me, for Christmas, she got me a cruise for her and I. And so we went to the Bahamas for a few days on this cruise, and up on the deck of the boat one day, and this was right before COVID hit, and I'm thankful that we made it out of a cruise without contracting COVID, but I was on the deck one day and I was laying there and Kate was reading. I was just kind of staring out at the ocean, and I was just kind of overwhelmed with this notion that after 16 years together, that she still wanted to spend that much time with just me. And that was incredible for me. That was a win, that she, after all that time, wanted to still be with me. Now, I'm not sure that's still the case after the 2020 that we just went through and us being together, and, you know, things are hard. So I think I have a lot of work to do in 2021 to kind of regain and capture that win and make sure that she still wants to spend that time for me. But what is your win? For so many people in our culture, the win kind of seems to be a default of, well, we didn't get divorced, right? We're still together. I mean, I can't stand the sight of them, but here we are. You know, that's not a win. That's bare minimal survival. What would a win look like for parenting? For those of you who are parents, what's the win? The default for so many parents is the win is my child is perfectly behaved, right? And so I just want my kids to behave. And that sounds kind of shallow. We don't, you know, cognitively think like, okay, you know, that's my goal, just to behave. That's it. But that's what a lot of us think. And so we parent towards behavior control and behavior modification. And that's the goal. For other people, perhaps maybe the goal for their kids is they want perfectly educated children, right? They want them to have the best education and be smart. And But listen, there are a ton of perfectly behaved, perfectly educated children who leave their parents' house and never want to go back. So once the kids are grown and gone, what's the win, right? For me, I would love, and I've started having some of these conversations with my kids as I was preparing this and got this onto my mind. I would love for my grown children, once they've left the house, to want to come home to visit Kate and I. That would be a win for me, right? And so, you know, for you, when I think about this, I realize that if that's what I want, then there are some adjustments that I need to make in my parenting. There's some adjustments that I need to make in the way that I go about things as a father, if that's what I want the outcome to be for my boys. But listen, in whatever area of life, or arena of life is important to you, you need to take some time to define what a win looks like in that arena. But listen, in whatever arena of life is important, like, you can't just do it and expect to know when you're being successful. That would be just chasing the wind. Now, uncoincidentally, we can find examples in the scriptures of someone who has defined the win for themselves. Right? Paul, whose writings have influenced Western culture and all of our lives to some degree or another, and is still influencing our lives, he set his win. And he did it in a response to failure. Right? It was in a response to loss in his life. Paul had stepped into history determined to end Christianity. To bring it into it because it was disturbing the world order between the Roman Empire and the Jews. Right? And so he rounds up Christians and he has them beaten and he has them imprisoned. Some of them even die under his control. And he had a track record of being very violent in his quest to end Christianity. But the whole time he thought he was serving God. But then he meets a resurrected Jesus, and all of a sudden he realizes, oh no, I've been working against God this entire time. Now he's got all of the against God violent behavior in his past, and he's feeling incredibly guilty about it. Right? And for the rest of his life, he is going to run into people who are aware of his past and maybe even are personally affected by his past. He may run into people that he had arrested and beaten. He would run into people for the rest of his life that they would be like, I know you. You came and you took my father. And we never saw him again. And so after he becomes an apostle, here's how Paul describes himself because of all of this that is now in his past, that's baggage that he carries. He says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. He says, for I am the least of the apostles. And he's talking about Matthew and John and all of them. I'm the least of the apostles and do not even deserve to be called an apostle. Well, why, Paul? Why don't you deserve it? Because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. Now, many of you thought that was Popeye. I am what I am. That wasn't Popeye. That was Paul. Right? In other words, Paul's saying, listen, I am what I am. I can't go back and change the past in the same way that you can't change your past. Saying I can't go back and undo what I've done. I am who I am, and I'm carrying the baggage that I'm carrying. There's nothing I can do about my past. But he keeps going, I am what I am. And his grace, talking about God, his grace to me was not without effect. In other words, God did not waste his time in revealing himself to me. His grace was not without effect. No. I worked harder than all of them. You know, Matthew, James, John, Bartholomew, like those guys are great. But I have outworked all of them. Because I had to. I had to outwork all of them because all that I had done in my past I had so much more to overcome and to make up for. And sure enough, the letters that he wrote to the churches, the ones that he started all around the Mediterranean rim, they have continued to shape Western civilization. He introduced Jesus to the non-Jewish world. And in 1 Corinthians, he writes out and he shows us what the win for his life is. He defines it clearly for himself. And my point in showing you what Paul's win is not that you would then adopt Paul's win and do that. That's not my point at all. My point is what he writes after establishing what his win is. Because what he writes after is crucial insight into what you and I need to do if we want to win in the arenas of life that are important to us. So here's what Paul says when it comes to his definition of a win for himself. In 1 Corinthians 9, he says, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible." So, Paul, what's your win? Paul would say, I'm glad you asked. My win is to win people. I want to convince the Jewish people that Jesus is their Messiah. Right? And I want to convince the Gentiles that God has done something great for them and for the entire world through the person of Jesus. Well, okay, Paul, that sounds good. But how? Paul would say, I'm glad you asked. Here's how. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews, which seems confusing because I would say, Paul, you are Jewish. So why do you need to become like a Jew? That doesn't make sense. But what he meant was when he was with the Jewish people, he was the best Jewish person that there was. So whatever made them Jewish, the Jewish essence of them, he out-Jewish essenced all of them so that he would be the best Jewish person that there was when he was around the Jewish people. Now, why would he do that? It's because he wanted to gain influence with Jewish people. He wanted them to see his actions, how good he was at doing the things that they do, so that he then had influence with them. He keeps going. He says, to those under the law, talking about the Jewish law, he says, I became like one under the law, though myself I am not under the law. Well, why would you make yourself under the law, Paul, if you're not under the law? It's simple. So as to win those under the law. And he said this because at the time there were Gentiles who were hearing about Jesus, and as they were believing and accepting Jesus, they were convinced that in order for it to all work, they had to convert to Judaism and live under the law of Judaism. So when Paul was around Gentiles who put themselves under the law, he would act as if he was also under that same law. Then he says this. He says, to those not having the law, which is all of the Gentiles that didn't convert, I became like one not having the law. Though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law. And we'll come back to that statement in just a second. But in that top statement there, what he was saying is this. When I'm with the Gentiles, I eat like a Gentile, I drink like a Gentile, I dress like a Gentile, I behave like a Gentile. In other words, wherever I am and whoever I'm with, I can get along with them. I can relate to them. I become whatever I need to become. Well, Paul, why would you do that? And his answer would be, because I've got a North Star. Right? I have a win that defines my life. And that win is I want everyone to know what God has done through the person of Jesus Christ. So he says, though I am not free from God's law, which was the Sinai code, those 600 laws that were handed down to Moses. He says, but I'm under Christ's law. And this is an important distinction. I won't spend too much time talking about this, but the law that he's talking about, Christ's law, is the singular command that Jesus gave to the disciples at the Passover. And as a person who's been around Tapestry much, you know the command. We talk about it all of the time. And that is that command where Jesus said, as I've loved you, you are to love one another. Paul says that law, I'm under that one. I'm not under all the 600, rabbinical laws. No, I'm under that law of Christ, which is why Paul gave up violence as a means to an end to further his cause. He keeps going. He says, I do that so as to win those not having the law. Then he finishes up the idea. He says, to the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people. Why, Paul? So that by all possible means, man, Paul was focused, right? He says, I've thought it through. I've ordered my life. I've organized my time. I'm using my resources so that by all possible means, I might save some. His win was to win other people to Christ. But what Paul writes next, after establishing what the win for him in his life is, what Paul writes next is for you. And it's for me. Paul knew what we know intuitively, that it is not enough to wish, it's not enough to want, it's not enough to just desire. And then as he's writing, he dips into this sports metaphor that all of the people reading at the time that in the context of him writing understood, and we have a good grasp of it as well. He dips into this metaphor, and it looks like he's changing the subject, but he's really not. Here's what he says in verse 24. He says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Which if we're honest, we're like, yes, Paul, thank you. We know how a race works, right? Everybody lines up. There's a starting line. We're all lined up there, right? Everybody runs when the race starts. One person wins, that person gets the prize, right? But here's the point that he's going to make. In that context, in the context of an athletic competition, the competition is obvious, right? In a race, the competition is lined up beside you. If you're playing football, the competition is facing you right there. You know, right? You know how you're doing in relationship to everyone else in this athletic set. But when it comes to winning in life, it's hard to tell how you're doing sometimes, isn't it? It is. It isn't as obvious as in an athletic event because there's no scoreboard, there's no fans, there's no clock telling you how much time you have left to accomplish what you want. And because of this, because there's not those things, so many times in life, we're just kind of aiming and we lack the urgency necessary to win. And listen to what he says next. He says, yeah, you know that all they run and the one that wins gets the prize. He tells us this. Then you should run in such a way as to get the prize. Implication being this: live your life with the same intensity, with the same urgency and focus that you would bring to a competition where you knew exactly what was needed for you to win. Right? Pay the price that you have to pay to make sure that you are prepared to win. Because in athletics, there is always a price to pay for being able to win. And in the arenas of life that matter, there is a price to be paid for winning. Paul keeps going. Verse 25, he says this: everyone who competes in the games, and he was talking about specific games. He was talking about the games that took place right outside of Corinth. And it was a famous place where for about 700 years, people would come from all over and they would hold these mini Olympic games. Right? And so all of his readers, when he's talking about the games, they know what he's referring to. He says everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. Why? Because they want to win. right? What's the point of being in the game if you're not going to win? And everybody who wins knows that there's sacrifices to be made, right? They know that you have to focus. They know that you have to say no to some things in order to be able to say yes to winning. So he says they go into strict training, and they do it to get a crown that will not last. And this is fascinating. The people who won those games, you know what they got? They got a crown of leaves. Woohoo! Right? I worked hard. I sacrificed. I won. Now I got some leaves on my head. Right? But check this out. They got a very specific type of leaf. The crowns were made out of laurel leaves. Right? Which, if that word laurel sounds familiar to you, this is where the phrase came from, resting on your laurels. Right? Resting on what you had done in the past, what you had already finished and won and earned and whatever, and just resting on that and not doing anything more in your future. Right? But these crowns that they would get, they would last for a little bit. They'd be beautiful when they went on the head, and they'd, I don't know, last for a week or so, but eventually the leaves would begin to die and wither, and the crowns would become brittle, and they would fall apart. And Paul says, think about the effort that goes into winning an athletic competition of that nature. For what? For a crown that won't last? Then he speaks to us as Jesus followers. And he says, think about the competition that you're in. Think about what is at stake. He says, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, meaning in light of that we're doing it for something that's going to last for eternity. Therefore, because of what is at stake, because we don't want to get to the end of our life and wonder how we did and not have any idea. Because Paul says, I don't want to have to wonder if I won because I can't see my competition lined up next to me. I don't know how I'm doing. He says, therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. And listen, it's easy in our culture to run aimlessly, right? It's easy to run, to parent, to work, to spend money, to date aimlessly. I've done it, right? I've spent seasons of my life just being aimless. And as I look back, I have regrets over the things that I could have and should have been doing, and where things in my life might be now had I not just spent seasons aimlessly. And if you haven't defined the wind, it is easy to spend seasons of your life running aimlessly. And Paul says, I'm not going to do that. I know what I want, I know what it takes, and I know what's necessary to get there. So he says it like this. He says, I do not fight like a boxer beating the air, which fighting was one of the games. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave. Paul, why? Why, Paul? He would say, because I know what I'm about. Right? I have defined the win for my life. And I'm going to order my life in such a way that I am going to get there. Right? Even though I know that I'm going to have to say no to myself in many areas to achieve the win, that is what I'm going to do. And isn't it true that in every arena of life that means the most, that for you to be successful, there are times you're going to have to say no to yourself? Of course it is. And then here was Paul's fear kind of driving all of this. He says, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. So here's the bottom line, Paul would say. I am going to prepare myself and compete as if my competition was next to me. I'm going to have that urgency. Right? I'm going to focus my life and my energy as if I could see my competition, because I don't want to get to the end of my life and it all have been for nothing. And I think he would say to us what we really already know, And that's this: you don't win by just wishing. You don't win by hoping. And this may be a controversial statement to you, but you don't win by just praying. You win by preparing to win, by saying no to you so that you can win. So that brings us back to the question. For you, in this season of life, in 2021, what is the win? Relationally, with your significant other, with your children, right? With extended family. What is the win? What are you going after? If you're in an arena where you're having to do things academically, what is the win for you there? Financially, for all of us headed into this new year with so many uncertainties still up in the air, what is the win? Are you preparing to win financially? It's only possible to prepare for the win if you know what the win is. And at the risk of sounding a little bit over dramatic as we kick off this new year, you only get to go through each season of life once. You're only in your 20s once. You're only in your 30s once. You only get to raise your children once. You only get one first marriage. The clock is ticking on the season of life that you're in. And if you don't know what the win is for that season of life, then culture, life, the people around you are all going to decide for you what your win is. So here's my challenge to you as we begin 2021 together. Determine what arenas of life are important to you. And once you've determined which ones are important, sit down with people who are a part of those arenas and have conversations with them where you determine what the win is for each arena of your life in this season. And the win for this season, this year, it may not be the overall win of life where you're wanting to end up in life, but it may be where you need to go this year to get there. And it'll be a step in the right direction. Then once you've determined what's the important arenas, who are the people that are impacted by it, what is the win in that? Once you've come up with the answer of what is the win, then order your life accordingly. Because listen, I want all of us to be winners in 2021. But in order for that to happen, we've got to know what the win looks like. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for fresh beginnings. Lord, as we come out of a year that was so difficult for so many people in so many different ways, Lord, there are so many of us that need to feel like we win in this upcoming year. And Lord, you have directions for us. You have things you want us to accomplish. Lord, you have laid out the most fulfilling way that we can order and live our lives. So Father, as we begin to go through this process and we become intentional about setting what the win is for us in this year, Lord, I pray you guide us in the direction that you have for us so that we can not only win when compared to a goal, but we can win in having lives that are being lived in the way that you meant for us to live our lives. Lord, I thank you that even in the dark times, you are with us. And I thank you that bright times lay in our future. Lord, we thank you for your mercy and for your grace. In your name, amen. Amen. Thank you for joining us this first Sunday of 2021. Good luck and wisdom to you as you set what the win is for you in this new year. We'll see you next week.